This park fucking sucks. So in the last video in this series, I asked you, the fans, to suggest a park that you wanted to see me redesign. And I should have realized what I was about to get myself into. Because go figure, the most suggested park would be this piece of shit right here. I mean, we're talking about a park with one of the weirdest layouts in the world. One of the lamest coaster collections of all time. And an aesthetic that I can only describe as rotting. This is the bottom of the barrel when it comes to Six Flags parks, with very little investment added to it. I mean, shit. The last coaster they got was a fucking SLC that was a hand-me-down from another park. This park literally only exists so they have a place to do the International Fireworks Festival every year. But outside of that, this park is fucking pointless. So ladies and gentlemen, this is how I would make Ronde better. Thank you for watching, everyone, and until next time, I wish you nothing but smooth travels. Take it easy, y'all. Okay, you guys want me to actually redesign this park, right? So I've spent the last month trying to wrap my head around this bizarre theme park and what I would do to fix it. And after a while, I think I got some really cool ideas that could take this park from an F park to at the very least an A-. So let's not waste any time. Grab yourselves a bowl of poutine and put on your favorite Canadiens jersey, because today I'm going to be making Ronde better. And as usual, let's first start off by talking about the problems. So as I said in the beginning, this park has an insanely bizarre layout. Think of it like a backwards C. Now this is mainly because this stretch of land along the west side of the park is used as a launching pad for fireworks during the annual International Fireworks Festival. And since that is a staple of Montreal's culture, there's no getting rid of this. So unfortunately, building a pathway that connects both ends of the park to make a circle is not possible. You got an entrance at the south which spurs off into 3 different pathways. One takes you to a dead end, one takes you down some weird path that doesn't even feel like it's part of the park, and one that shoots straight down the middle to the center of the park. At the end of the middle path, you got another path that takes you past the north entrance and to another dead end. Oh yeah, did I forget to mention there's 2 entrances to this park? This is because there's so little room for parking on the island it's built on that they had to split the parking lot in 2. With the main lot along this strip of land here, and the rest just shoved at the top of the island. As for the themed lands of this park, well, there is none. Literally the only 2 themed lands in this park are this random fisherman wharf themed area called Fort Edmonton, and the kids area Ribambelle. Outside of that, this park is just a mishmash of different rides and attractions, with no cohesion or theme to tie everything together. Speaking of the rides, let's look at those quickly. So this park has 8 roller coasters. Highlights include a B&M Mega Coaster, because I guess this park wasn't good enough for a hyper coaster, a Batman clone, and yeah, that's really it for the highlights. Outside of that, you got a rough-ass racing wooden coaster that barely races and feels completely out of date, a boomerang coaster, a shitty Zamperla Wild Mouse, this weird indoor coaster with some creepy-looking dragon statues, the aforementioned fucking SLC, and a kids coaster. This park also nearly got Green Lantern First Flight from Six Flags Magic Mountain, which is widely regarded as one of the worst roller coasters of all time. But by some miracle, the park ended up opting against building it. So outside of people wanting to ride every B&M Hyper / Mega Coaster, or people who want to ride every Batman clone, what the fuck would even attract people to this park? Not a single standout coaster in this park's lineup. And the ones that even come close to being a standout don't remotely compare to their counterparts at other parks. Like, why would someone make the trek to Montreal for Goliath, when they could just go to Canada's Wonderland in Toronto and ride Behemoth and Leviathan? So of course, my 2 main points of interest is adding themed lands to this park and bolstering their coaster lineup. I will give this park 1 point for having a pretty good flat ride collection. It might not rival Canada's Wonderland's flat ride collection, but it is very respectable. And is probably the only thing really carrying this park. You'll notice a lot of these flat rides are going to be kept, albeit with new themes to fit in with their new lands. I am going to be moving rides around the park to where I think they would fit better, and you'll see what I mean by that in just a little bit. Finally, I want to address the disgusting architecture in this park. For those of you who don't know, this park is built on the grounds of Xpose 67, one of the greatest world expos to ever happen. And for some reason, the owners of this park didn't want to let go of that history, because many of the buildings from the expo are still standing here. As you can see, the owners didn't give a single fuck when it came to preserving the original buildings here, as all of them are rusting or are just straight up abandoned. So I'm not going to be preservative at all with this redesign. This park needs the ultimate facelift, and if that means demolishing all this bullshit in order to make something awesome, so be it. Alright, let's get into the fun stuff. Allons-y, mes amis. So I'm going to switch things up for this episode and combine the entrance and front land of the park into one section. Mostly because there's nothing I'd change with the entrance itself. I mean, it's very Six Flagsy and suits the park already. Going in is where we'll start to see changes. This new entrance area will be split into two mini sections, Grande Entrée and Fort Edmonton. When you walk in, you're immediately greeted by the Grand Carousel and a large statue that was kept from Xpose 67. In this version of the park, this statue will be retrofitted into a new fountain, with the statue itself painted in different colors rather than just being all white. The Fisherman Wharf area will be retained, with the major change coming in an upgrade to Arcade theme, with the outside being rethemed to fit in better with that Fisherman Wharf theme, and the inside totally redesigned to not look like a fucking rusty warehouse. But the big changes come in this empty space over here. This area used to be home to a log flume called La Piton. This ride splashed riders up until 2017, when for no good reason the park decided to tear it out and replace it with nothing. So you'd think I'd go with another log flume to replace the original one, right? Well, honestly, this space is pretty small to begin with, and as you'll see later, I'll be incorporating a water ride into a different section of the park. Instead, I thought it would be cool to add a real eye-catching attraction to this section of the park. And with that, we got our first major new attraction, Ronde de Montreal. This is one of those hubless Ferris wheels from Intamin. These things are really cool, and I love how they come in a variety of different shapes. For this installation, we'll be going with the oval layout since it will look really unique and stand out from other Ferris wheels. Now, I know this park already has a Ferris wheel, but the old one will be getting removed, and that'll leave a gap in the lineup for a new observation-style attraction. This will be a cool addition to the park's skyline and a real icon for the front of the park. But this isn't the only thing coming to this area, as right next door to the Ferris wheel will be the entrance for the first new roller coaster I'm adding to this park, a B&M surf coaster called Croix de Glace. This coaster is based on the awesome sport known as ice cross, where skaters race each other through an insane ice course that features ramps, dives, and turns. This sport was made famous by Red Bull and their former Crashed Ice series, which used to hold its final in Quebec City every year. This series would then become the ATSX, which still runs to this day. But going back to this coaster, I thought up the idea after watching a clip of one of these races and thinking to myself, man, this would be a cool theme for a surf coaster. Especially when you consider that the surf coaster is a stand-up launch coaster with moving seats that accentuate the airtime. The technology lends itself so much to the theme. The ride starts over where these docks are. After a slight turn to the right, the lights go off and you launch into a large turnaround. This is followed by a large airtime hill where you are absolutely ejected into the air. This is then followed by a massive corkscrew and a powerful turnaround over the midway. The ride then hits a double up that sends riders into the lake below. Afterwards comes the most picturesque moment of the coaster, where riders fly through the center of the Ferris wheel. Much like how Thunder Dolphin blasts through the center of its Ferris wheel at Tokyo Dome City. Afterwards, one last airtime hill and a turnaround brings you to the brake run, where riders then exit out into Fort Edmonton. Now you might have noticed I've yet to mention the old abandoned monorail, which has a station right in front of where the Ferris wheel will be built. And that's because I'm getting rid of the monorail. I know, hear me out. Look, it's not like this thing is going to be opening back up anytime soon, especially considering this thing has been around since Xpose 67. Frankly, this park is better off completely tearing it out. As this video progresses, you'll see that some of my ideas benefit from not having abandoned rusty track in the way. And I know I've said in the past,
I'm of the opinion that every park could benefit from a mode of transportation. And
I'm of the opinion that every park could benefit from a mode of transportation. And I'm of the opinion that every park could benefit from a mode of transportation.
But with this park being so small to begin with, I feel we can make an exception to that rule here. Anyways, continuing past Ronde de Montreal, we got our first dead-end area, which is just a jumble of random bullshit, including a Batman clone called Vampire, a Zamperla giant discovery called Titan, a Sky Screamer style ride called Vol Ultime, which is comically the smallest of all the Sky Screamers in the Six Flags chain, and a huge plot of land full of abandoned crap. This section of the park will be home to La Ronde's first new land. Wait, what? Smooth using an IP? I thought he only liked original ideas. Listen, if Six Flags got access to the DC characters, we might as well use them here. And don't worry, this is the only IP-based land I got for this redesign. Now, I know the Quebecois don't usually gravitate towards American IPs, hence things like their Batman clone being called Vampire, and the complete lack of any DC or Looney Tunes characters currently in the park. One thing I noticed is that this park seems to really cater to the older generation of the Quebecois. You know, the ones that are super nationalistic, literally stick their chins up at anyone who doesn't speak French, and then come down to my home state of Florida every winter and act like they own the fucking place. This is the same kind of generation that tried to turn Quebec into its own country and failed les miserables. I know the younger generation is more outgoing and seem to embrace things outside of their culture a lot more than the people that came before them. And those are the types of people this park should be focusing on, since that's the type of crowd that would pay to go to a theme park in the first place. And if we're gonna bring an American IP into the park, why not go with one that is as universally praised as Batman? So this land will become Gotham City. After passing through a building facade, you enter the city, with buildings built around the pathways to make you feel like you've been dropped into the heart of the most dangerous city on Earth. And having the Jacques Cartier Bridge in the background of this land only amplifies the aesthetic I'm going for here. Here we will have tons of rides based off the Cape Crusader himself and the catalog of iconic enemies he goes up against. Starting with the flat rides, Vol Ultime, Vertigo, and Orbite will all be kept. Vol Ultime will become Batwing Vol Ultime, with Batman-style decals on the seats and a new queue house that looks like a theater from the outside. Vertigo will become Le Marteau de Harley Quinn, with the ride redesigned to look like you're riding on the end of Harley Quinn's hammer as she swings it around and around. And new building structures in the background that has a massive mural of the Clown Princess herself. And Orbite will become Bane Coup de Puissance, where the ride will now take place in the docks of Gotham City. Within a warehouse, you enter the ride vehicle, where in front of you are large canisters filled with venom. Once the ride begins, the canisters empty and you see pipes leading to the vehicle glowing green before you blast into the sky. Now you're probably wondering why I didn't mention Titan, and that's because I'm moving this ride out of this section into a different part of the park, but I'll be talking more about that later. What's important right now is that I needed this space for the first new attraction in this land, Arkham Asylum Lockdown. This will be very similar to the Justice League Battle for Metropolis attractions that appear at a multitude of the Six Flags parks, but this ride will instead take place entirely within Arkham Asylum, with riders trying to stop the villains from escaping the asylum. The nearby Slingshot attraction will also be getting removed to help open up more space for the attraction, as well as serve as an area to extend the queue for Arkham Asylum if needed. The last ride getting removed from this area is Disco Ronde. Despite being a good flat ride for what it is, I wanted to put in a flat ride that was way more eye-catching than what is currently here. And with that, we got our first major flat ride addition for this part of the park, Vengeance de l'Enigma. This will be an intimate tourbillon based around the Riddler, with riders trapped in a spinning contraption that only the brightest of minds can escape. The final re-theme in this area involves the current big draw to this section, Vampire. Now, no, I'm not renaming this Batman the ride, nor am I theming this to Arkham Asylum like the one they have at Parque Warner Madrid. Instead, I thought it would be fun to theme this to and rename it as Mr. Freeze. This new version of the ride will have a queue house very similar to the ones found on the Mr. Freeze coasters at Six Flags Over Texas and Six Flags St. Louis. The new ride will feature blue track with frozen buildings and rubble surrounding the attraction, as you try not to be sent back to the Ice Age by Mr. Freeze himself.
What killed the dinosaurs? The Ice Age!
You serious?
Now there's this whole corner of the land that is totally abandoned, featuring two buildings that are totally unused, as well as this massive plot of land that used to host an Intamin stand-up coaster called Cobra. First, let's address this building over here. This will be the location of a new Vekoma madhouse called Maison des Faux de Joker. Now, I've always been a massive fan of the madhouse, with its trippy visuals and awe-inspiring ride experience, making you feel like the room you're in is spinning around you, and it's great to finally get the opportunity to put one of these into a theme park. This ride takes place in an abandoned warehouse, paying tribute to all the abandoned bullshit that can be found in this park. Riders are here to participate in an auction being overseen by Carmine Falcone. only for everything to be revealed as a trap by the Joker. You are then ushered into a room where you take your seat and a lap bar comes down over you. All of a sudden, fog fills the room, which turns out to be fear toxin, and riders are sent flipping around the warehouse as the Joker laughs in the background. Near the end, Batman and Nightwing blast through one of the walls and save the riders from their impending doom. Riders exit back out to the city, which conveniently exits right by the entrance to the last new attraction to this land, Batman Vol de Chevalier. This will be the star attraction of this new land, and will add a new e-ticket roller coaster to this park. Now originally I was going to go with an Intamin Blitz for this attraction, but I didn't want this attraction to be almost a carbon copy of Gotham City Escape at Parque Warner Madrid. So instead, I decided to go with the next best thing, a Vekoma Super Boomerang. Alright, calm down, I'm just kidding. This will be a Vekoma launch coaster, featuring all the craziest maneuvers from the Dutch wonders themselves. The queue takes place where this circular building is, which will be rebuilt to look like Wade Manor. As riders go through the queue, they are led to the Batcave, where they board their vehicle and launch off into the night. This coaster will use Vekoma's Ghost Rider layout, which includes an awesomely large top hat, this awesome double zero-G roll, an Immelman that feels like it takes forever to twist out of, and a new Vekoma standard, a diving heartline roll. This layout might be short, but every move it makes is so massive, and is a perfect example of a layout that fires on all cylinders. And I know it's not as exciting using an off-the-shelf layout, but since it fits the dimensions of this plot of land perfectly, I figured why not go with it. When looking at this area, I felt it was screaming to be turned into Gotham City. And I could have gone with a more generic DC land, and featured all the other members of the Justice League. But with the way this land was set up, I felt it was the perfect opportunity to do a full-on Batman/Gotham City land instead. Plus, Batman is my favorite superhero, so I was all over the opportunity to design my own Batman-themed land. Now, I'm not gonna lie, it is tempting to make the rest of this park a DC-themed theme park. Like, you could put Metropolis over here, the Amazon over here, a Joker-themed carnival over here, and call it a day. But I didn't want to revolve the park around a singular IP. I felt that with a park like this, it needs to embrace different themes, most of them original. Hopefully this will be the big mega draw for this park, bringing in many international visitors and hopefully really impressing the locals. But if the locals don't like this land, they'll hopefully be more into the other new lands I got in mind for this park. Let's now hit a right from Grand Entrée and go into the next new land in this park. Okay, yeah, I still went with an Amazon-themed land for this section of the park, but don't worry, this is not based on Wonder Woman. Instead, this is themed to the man, the myth, and the legend, Jeff Bezos. Nah, I'm just kidding. This land will be themed around the actual Amazon rainforest. This area of the park is very disjointed, almost feeling like it's not actually part of the park itself, with a long walkway full of nothing, and a couple of rides clumped together that just happen to be in the area. This area currently consists of a Vekoma Boomerang, a Larson Loop, and an awful pendulum ride that doesn't swing past 45 degrees. There's also this plot of land that used to host a Vekoma Corkscrew called Super Manege. This was apparently going to be the spot where Vipère was going to be built. The fucking nerve of this park for even considering putting that coaster here. Thank God for 2020, or else the poor people of Montreal would have had to suffer through that atrocity of a coaster. But with that being said, I do really like the name Vipère, and wanted to incorporate that into a new coaster for this land. Now, unlike the last video in this series where I rethemed a Vekoma Boomerang to make it enjoyable for a new generation, this time around I will be demolishing the Boomerang to bring in a new attraction. Now, besides the plot of land that Boomerang stands on, there is also this long stretch of land that leads towards the front of the park, with the only thing in it being, you guessed it, another abandoned building. So with this long plot of land, we could put a massive shuttle-style coaster that could be really eye-catching to the public. Now, something like a Vekoma Super Boomerang would fit really well into this plot of land, but once again, I wanted to go with something more unique, and this time something that you won't find anywhere in North America. I recently came across this video of a coaster at Chongqing Sunac Land in China called Legendary Twin Dragon. This is a new generation Intamin Impulse coaster, featuring lap bar restraints and a much larger and longer ride experience compared to the previous generation of Impulse coasters. For comparison, the old Wicked Twister at Cedar Point reached a max height of 216 feet, while this new generation model reaches a whopping 230 feet in the air. With its two twisting snake-like towers, I knew immediately this was my V-pair. Now this ride does take up a long strip of land, and for me to be able to fit this in properly, I'm also going to have to get rid of the Larson loop in order to have enough space for this ride. This coaster will look so cool from the front of the park, and with its intimidating height and speed, it will be a real crowd pleaser for all the thrill seekers in the audience. Across the way, you'll find Balançoire dans la Jungle, a wave swinger attraction that's fun for the whole family. Now this ride already exists in the park as Tour de Ville, and is located near the back entrance to the park. But since I'm going to need this space for an attraction that I'll be talking about later in this video, and with this area needing a good family flat ride, I thought it would make the most sense to move this attraction to this part of the park. Give it some jungle theming and a monkey figure at the front, and you got a complete package. Now this won't be the only new flat ride being added to this land, as Manitou will be ripped out for an all-new attraction as well. For this edition, I wanted to go with another eye-catching attraction that would be totally unique to the park, and this edition will be provided by the current king of flat rides, Zamperla. Now recently, they've revealed a new concept for a ride called the Zeta Swing. This insane ride is touted as the tallest pendulum ride in the world, reaching a whopping 196 feet into the air, which is really impressive for a ride that doesn't take up too much space. This is like a top spin on steroids, except instead of flipping riders, the ride is more focused on the dropping sensation you get from a drop tower, mixed with the swinging sensation you get from a giant discovery or a screaming swing. This attraction, which will be named Crieur de Ciel, will be a top contender for best flat ride in the park, and another dominating attraction to anchor this side of the park. Finally, we got the other big coaster in this land, and another unique style of coaster that you won't find anywhere else in Canada. This will be a B&M wing coaster called Predator. This will take up the space formerly occupied by Super Manège, and will fly all over the land, soaring above guests' heads as they travel through the area. Now this coaster will be on the smaller end when it comes to wing coasters, but as B&M has proven with rides like Flug der Dämonen at Heide Park, or Raptor at Gardaland, even the smallest wing coasters can pack a punch. After turning out of the station, riders head up the lift and go through the wing coaster's most famous element, the dive drop. Now you might have noticed that this dive drop is located where the lift to Le Splash currently is, and this is because that ride will be removed for an addition I'll be talking about in a bit. But with the lift for Le Splash gone, it opens up the room to fit this dive drop. The coaster dives under a pathway and into a quick bunny hill before hitting an Immelman. Though unlike most Immelmans that go right back down to ground level, this one will have an extra step down to provide an extra pop of airtime to the element. This is followed by a demonic knot that wraps around one of the spires of V-Pair. Afterwards, a forceful high-speed turnaround goes through the final element, a long 0G roll that feels like it goes on forever, fitting through a keyhole in the middle of a massive tree. This coaster hits one last turn and into the brake run it goes. You've probably noticed that with every land so far that the rides seem to stack on top of each other, utilizing the space available to its full advantage. This is an idea for land design I got from a famous park in Germany called Phantasialand. This park is incredibly themed, with a killer ride lineup that's all jam-packed into a small space. Just look at what they did with this park with areas like Ruckburg and Klugheim, and you'll see what I mean. So I realized pretty quickly that I needed to implement this philosophy into the park. But trying to apply this philosophy to the park got me real tired at times. To give my brain a rest, nothing helped me more than a good book. And one book that really helped me clear my head is also the sponsor for this video, Doug Armstrong's Scottish Cherokee. This fascinating tale follows a family who leaves Scotland after it comes under the iron grip of England, traveling to a new world where they become one with the natives that inhabit it. It's a beautiful tale about how the look of someone never paints the whole picture of where they come from. But more importantly, it's a story about freedom. Click the link in the description to dive into this beautiful tale of ancestry. This book is available in paperback, on Kindle, and as an audiobook. Alright, now that we all got to enjoy a little trip through history, let's continue on to the next land on our tour. Oh look, another theme that shows up a lot in the Six Flags chain. But hey, if it works at parks like Magic Mountain and Fiesta, Texas, why wouldn't it work here? So this land will take up the center area of the park, which currently houses most of the park's flat rides, both of the park's water rides, 2 coasters in Le Monster and Toboggan Nordique, and an abandoned sky tower. Now all of the flat rides here will be staying, but rethemed to fit the steampunk aesthetic. Most of the rides will even keep their current names, with the only name changes coming in Demon becoming Steam Demon, and Bateau Pirate becoming Dirigeable. But where we will see the big changes come is in their anchor attractions. Let's start off with the area that is currently occupied by Le Splash. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this ride is going to be demolished to open up space for other attractions, but a big chunk of the space left over by the Shoot the Chutes ride will be used for a brand new coaster. Now, once again, I gotta bring up the old Vipère proposal. Even though the idea of bringing in the old Green Lantern coaster was terrible, the idea of a 4D free spinning style coaster for this park wasn't. And with a small plot of land like this, I felt it would be perfect to build a coaster that wouldn't bring its riders severe pain. And with that, we got an SNS 4D free spin. This ride will be called Dr. Diabolique. Now, from what I've heard, it seems the general consensus is that the smaller version of this model, as seen in King's Dominion and Adventureland, seems to be the better of the two models. So that version is what will appear in this park. It's always good to have a coaster where no two experiences are alike, and with this ride's randomized spinning, it would be a perfect fit for this park. At the south end of the land, we got a very mid-Wild Mouse called Toboggan Nordique. It's okay, but I mean its layout is so lame and makes a regular Mack Wild Mouse look creative. Now, I usually try not to replace a coaster with the exact same type of coaster, but I will make an exception to that rule here since this is a version of the Wild Mouse that I think is way better than your standard Wild Mouse, and they have a layout that would fit this plot of land, that being the Gerstlauer bobsled. These versions of the Wild Mouse are way better than your standard Wild Mouse since they incorporate twisted drops and helixes on top of your standard zigzag turns and straight drops. This coaster will be called Hoche Enfer, and will share the same layout as another bobsled coaster at Wiener Prater in Austria called Die Gesenkte Sau. This coaster packs a long layout into a small space by stacking itself really high, with the coaster progressing level to level, traversing fun dips and twists along the way. With the turnaround of the Splash gone, we got space for a new queue house, which is important considering that we'll need the space left by the original queue to fit this new coaster in. This ride will feature hot rod styled cars and racing style theming that's fused with steampunk to bring something really unique to the table. But if those two coasters weren't enough for you, get ready for the last coaster edition here. So, there's this old wooden coaster in the back of the land called Le Monster, and it is on its last legs. At this point, it feels like it needs to be saved. If only there was a way to update this attraction. You know, do something to modernize it, make it smoother, maybe do some flips, make it feel like a hybrid of two coasters. Well, I know just the solution. Okay, I'm just kidding. You know I'm gonna say RMC. Here's another one of those coasters where it's so obvious to call up RMC to overhaul it. And look at how massive this coaster is. If RMC got to work on it, this ride could potentially be a top 5 hybrid coaster. Especially if they pull an Iron Gwazi and go way off the ride path to the original, and combine both sides of the coaster to make something real special. After one of RMC's classic pre-lift segments, the ride rises into the air before hitting a 92-degree beyond vertical drop, passing under the final turnaround, creating an insane head chopper, and rising towards the first big element of the ride, an outer bank turn that yeets riders right out of their seats. You then drop back down and rise up again into the next big element, and what is in my opinion the best element in the world, a death roll. Sorry Velocicoaster fanboys, but death roll over Mosasaurus roll any day of the week. Afterwards, you go into a large 0G stall, before rising up into a 0G roll. You then hit an elevated wave turn before launching over a crest and into a double down. You then hit a double inverting stall followed by a massive airtime hill. You then hit a couple twists that rock you left and right before hitting one last airtime filled drop, then rising up and hitting the brakes. As for the name of this ride, I decided to go with Colossus. Fitting since it will be one of the biggest coasters in the park, and it ties the coaster to the similarly named coasters in Six Flags Magic Mountain and the upcoming Six Flags Qiddiya. The final addition to this land is not a flat ride, or a water ride, or even a roller coaster, but is instead a restaurant. Now, this park doesn't have a lot of sit-down restaurants, with most of the park's food offerings coming in the form of food stands. With the removal of the abandoned Sky Tower, it leaves a nice chunk of land open for a decent-sized sit-down restaurant. Now, I love when restaurants and theme parks bring an element you won't find in your typical restaurant. And it turns out there's a chain of theme park-based restaurants that would work perfectly both in this park and with the steampunk theme. I am referring to none other than the Roller Coaster Restaurant. This awesome restaurant concept can be found at some of the most popular parks in the world, such as Alton Towers in the UK and Europa Park in Germany. This restaurant is unique in that your food is delivered to you via a roller coaster track, which adds such a cool visual element to the whole experience. This addition would add a premium dining experience to the park, something which this park lacks, and will be a great option for those not interested in the typical food you'll find in a theme park. With that, we now move to the final land in this reimagined take on La Ronde. Our final stop on this tour takes us to the World of Monsters. This land takes up the back portion of the park and will bring guests face to face with the biggest monsters of mythology. Now currently in this land, you got what is unanimously the best coaster in the current version of this park in Goliath, a unique indoor roller coaster called Dragon, a sky coaster called Catapult, a classic Ferris wheel called Grand Rue, the earlier mentioned Tour de Ville, an abandoned haunted house, 2 abandoned show venues, and what is probably the dumbest thing ever added to a theme park, a hand-me-down Vekoma SLC called Ednor Latak. Seriously, the nerve of this park to put one of the shittiest types of coasters in this park in fucking 2010 of all years, and think that putting it over water would be enough to make it acceptable. Now we'll get into what's replacing that in a second, but let's start over at the entrance to this land and work our way in. So over by Colossus, there is this building that's completely walled off. I'm going to assume this is another one of those buildings that doesn't get used for anything. This is a great spot for another flat ride for the park. So for this spot, I decided to go with a Larson Loop. Yeah, you thought I was getting rid of that Larson Loop, didn't you?
Surprise, motherfucker.
Honestly, I don't think these flat rides are all that bad, offering some unbelievable hang time and insane speed as you flip upside down constantly. This will be the same Larson Loop that stood in L'Amazon, but moved here to bolster this section of the park. It's almost a fair trade in a sense since this area's wave swinger will be moving to that portion of the park. This ride will be called Oracle, with new rock-style theming built around it to make it look like a portal into the unknown. Right next door, the abandoned haunted house and amphitheater will be ripped out to make way for a brand new river rapids ride called Rivière de Hero. This will be a Hafima River Rapids ride very similar to River Quest at Phantasialand in Germany. Riders will encounter different monsters as they go through a multitude of drops, tunnels, and even a whirlpool. Only the brave can survive the raging rapids of this river adventure. Goliath will be replaced with nothing. Obviously that coaster is staying where it is. Also not going anywhere is the Sky Coaster, now being renamed Icarus to pay tribute to the boy who flew too close to the sun. Next door, you got the big Ferris wheel Grand Rue. Now I mentioned earlier on in this video that this attraction will be retired in favor for a more modern Ferris wheel at the front of the park. And with this gone, we now have space for an attraction that not only fits into this land thematically, but honestly should have been placed here in the first place. That being the Zamperla Giant Discovery, Titan. Yes, this ride finally comes back into play. I was going to try to retheme it to fit Gotham City originally, but eventually I decided it would be better to move it to this land and open up the space for a shooting dark ride in its original spot. This is one of the best flat rides in the park currently, and it would be a travesty for it to not be part of my reimagining of this park. And like I said, the theme is already on point with this land, so why not add it here? The final 2 additions to this land are roller coaster additions that will round out this park's lineup. First, we got this massive chunk of land that is currently being occupied by Tour de Ville, this carousel that's seemingly no longer in operation, and a massive building called Le Jardin des Etoiles that's not even being used for anything at the moment. With all of this removed, you got a nice spot for a new roller coaster addition. Now you've probably noticed that I've been favoring unique coaster types for this remodel, and for this spot, I wanted something that was both compact and rare to find. And after some heavy research, I was surprised to come across a coaster type that would actually fit the spot and be themed to fit the area very nicely. Get ready, because this pick is totally going to come out of left field, because my idea for this area is none other than an Intamin Aqua Tracks. Yeah, you forgot those coasters existed, didn't you? At the moment, only one of these exists in the world, that being Atlantis Adventure at Lotte World in South Korea. These coasters are awesome, offering a quick flashy layout and fun interactions with the water around it. As well, these coasters take up a surprisingly small footprint despite looking so massive from the outside. Since this type of coaster is still listed on Intamin's website, I can only assume these models are still available for purchase. This coaster will be called Chasseur de Dragon, and will have riders blast through a castle to find the dragon hidden within. This coaster will have the same layout as Atlantis Adventure. It will be a fun and thrilling attraction that everyone in the family can enjoy. But wait, Smooth, Doesn't La Ronde already have a dragon-themed coaster? Well, you see, that coaster and that piece of shit SLC is getting removed for the final edition in this park. This last edition is going to be a Mack Extreme spinning coaster called Cyclop. Now, you might have noticed in my Canada's Wonderland video, I avoided putting one of these into that park and went for the family model instead. And that was partly so I could save this coaster type for this park. You see, all of these ideas I have are part of a shared universe, so I gotta make sure that if I put an idea in one park, I don't replicate it in a competing theme park. Hence why La Ronde gets the more thrilling version of the coaster. For this ride, I wanted to introduce some elements to it yet to be seen on other Mack Extreme spinners, such as Time Traveler at Silver Dollar City or Ride to Happiness at Plopsalandapon. This coaster will start on a turntable, kind of like the ones you'll find on the mock Power Splashes. You're transferred onto the launch track and launch over a bunny hop and into a top hat. But the twist here is you don't end up cresting the top hat, instead rolling back down over the bunny hop and into a beyond vertical spike, where you then swing back into the launch and finally crest the top hat. Once out over the lake, riders hit what I call a figure 8 banana roll, which is essentially like that figure 8 turnaround from Shambhala at Port Aventura, but banks so hard at the top that it counts as an inversion. This is then followed by a first-time element for a spinning coaster, a non-inverting loop. This will be a very disorienting element, especially for a spinning coaster. After a big turnaround, the ride hits a pair of interlocking corkscrews, and then turns into a trick track double up. The ride then dips and goes into its final element, a flying snake dive. And since the coaster has shaved off some of its momentum by this point, this element should offer some insane hang time as you slowly twist upside down midair. Kinda like how you slowly crawl through the Heartline roll on a Premier Skyrocket 2. This element leads directly into the brake run and back into the station. This ride might be short, but with enough great elements, it will still leave a lasting impression on everyone who rides it. And personally, I prefer a short coaster where every element packs a punch, over a long coaster where some of the elements are rather mid. With all that, I give you my reimagined take on Quebec's biggest amusement park, La Ronde. Now, there are some things I didn't go over in this video, such as the kiddie land in this park, Ribambelle. And that's because, for one, I didn't feel like thinking up anything for it, and two, this land is honestly okay as it is. It already has a healthy assortment of rides, and a consistent theme unlike the rest of the park. And of course I could have shoved in Looney Tunes or Peanuts here, but I didn't want to go too far with the IP loading in this park, especially after doing a whole section themed to Gotham City. I also didn't mention anything about live entertainment in this park. And this is because unlike most parks that have one or two sit-down shows in them, for this park I actually wanted to switch it up and have all the entertainment be done through street performers, especially with a place like Montreal having such a huge street performance culture. I thought it would be cool to incorporate that into this park. Every area will feature costume characters, puppeteers, acrobats, and so much more to make each land feel completely immersive. There's the large grandstand area that hosts guests during the annual International Fireworks Festival. Now, of course, I can't get rid of this since it's a massive draw for this park, and it's important for getting butts through the turnstiles during the summer months. But it would be cool if the park implemented some sort of a water show here, especially at night. Maybe do something similar to World of Color at Disney's California Adventure, and have a large colorful fountain show at night featuring much of the music and art that identifies with the culture of Quebec. This will at least make these grandstands useful throughout the entire season, rather than only being useful for one event. Finally, I think it would be cool to introduce some sort of a winter event to the park, similar to the holidays at the parks or Winterfest events found at the other Six Flags/Cedar Fair parks. It'd be awesome to have a carnivalesque event here with ice skating, beautiful light displays, snowball fighting, and even a meet and greet with Quebec's national treasure, Bonhomme.
The fuck is that?
This will add another fun event to the park and make it feel like more of a year-round park than what it currently is. From doing this redesign, I realized how much potential this park actually has at being something real special, especially with how little the park has on offer at the moment. It opens the door to so many ideas. This is a park I would not have even wanted to look at if it weren't for you guys, so thank you all for suggesting this park to me. Despite this being a park I despise, this was honestly the most fun I've had yet redesigning a theme park. maybe from this point on, I'll focus on only doing crappy amusement parks. Because when you look deep enough into them, they have the most potential to become something that's truly out of this world. If you liked what you saw and want to see more fun creative content like this, hit the subscribe button and enable notifications. A like on this video will go a long way in getting the algorithm to share this video with more coaster enthusiasts like you. And if you have any suggestions for a park you'd like to see get redesigned, talk about it in the comments section below. Your suggestion just might be the next park I pick for this series. Anyways, thank you all for making it to the end of this video, and until next time, je m'appelle Smooth, et je ne te souhaite que de bon voyage. Allez-y doucement. I think I got that there. I'm not doing that again. We're done. Bye.